So Marc, we got a lot of things I want to talk about, but I want to start with two things that are in the news today, just to get your general response to them. The first one kind of happened as I was landing in San Francisco today, which is Mark Pincus at Zynga. Can he turn Zynga around and turn Zynga into what it was supposed to be?
Well, let me start. I mean, both Dan Primack and Mark are friends of mine, and I respect them both enormously. That said, we always do get a little bit excited. I always do get a little bit excited when the founder comes back. It kind of warms my heart. The thing I always observe is, it's this new book. Actually, your colleagues have this new book coming out on Steve Jobs at Apple, and I think one of the things, the book is fantastic, by the way. One of the things that the book, sort of makes very clear is just how screwed Apple was in 1997. Just absolutely in the pits. And we've erased that from our collective memory, but it really was 90 days away from bankruptcy. And the products really were terrible, and all kinds of things had gone wrong. Nobody, including Steve, I don't think, actually thought it would necessarily be possible to turn Apple around. And today, Apple being the shining pinnacle of American capitalism and technological innovation, to me is a story. It's a story of Apple, but it's also just a story of what's actually possible through innovation and what's possible through, very aggressive people going after very big goals. And so I think for sure he has a shot. There's no reason he can't do it.
Let me ask the other thing, which was there was a report yesterday or this morning that Google had taken a look at Twitter, that Twitter had hired Goldman Sachs to advise it. There's been rumors that a company you're on the board of, Facebook, could theoretically have interest. So let me ask it this way. In a year from now, do you think Twitter is an independent company?
So I don't want to comment specifically on Twitter. I will say I have been shocked in the last 5 years how little M&A there's been as compared to what I think that there both should have been and will be. And I think there are a lot of big companies that are on the wrong side of various kinds of technological shifts. And there are a lot of acquisitions that kind of everybody knows should happen.
Then why aren't they? What's the big impediment?
So I don't think this applies to Facebook or Google as much, because Larry and Mark can kind of do whatever they want because of how their companies are set up. But generally speaking, and this will go to some of the stuff that we'll probably talk about if we talk about things like bubble and the current environment, is we're in this environment of just extremely intense risk aversion on the part of public companies in particular. And we're in this kind of mode where public companies are being, basically forced by, pressure from activists and their investors to basically give back huge amounts of cash instead of investing it in their business. And so it's one of the things that's so striking about the current environment is public companies are so risk averse, and then as a consequence, basically not everything, a very large percentage of the kind of interesting, new, innovative, high, ambition, high investment things are happening on the private side. And it's just gotten very extreme. On both sides, it's gotten very extreme. Historically, in a period like this, there would be a lot more combinations, and I would expect at some point for M&A to really pick up, because there's a lot of this that does ultimately have to happen. But it is very striking that it's not happening as much as you would think.
I'm curious then, does it mean for you, as somebody who wants the companies you're invested in, the still private companies, to grow, there's this argument, the Bill Gurley argument, right? Go public as soon as you can possibly go public. Do you feel the other way, stay private as long as possible? Because once you go public, you have all those issues you just talked about, which retard growth? So
if you go public in this environment with a single class share structure and a board that gets elected every 12 months, God help you. You're a chum in the water. And in particular, God help you, if you're a young company and you're not actually fully financed and you're going to need to raise money again, God really help you. Because they will come at you and they will basically short your stock and basically drive you on your stock price, prevent you from being able to raise money again, and give you a self-fulfilling bankruptcy, which is always an interesting process to go through. I almost got there in a prior life. And so there's never been a more dangerous time to kind of be an unprotected public company. I mean, that said, Facebook demonstrates, Google demonstrates, and there are others that there are protections you can wrap around these companies. You can do dual class stock. You can do other kinds of voting control things. And you can basically build, I call it sort of building a fortress. You can build a fortress around a company once a certain point to have it be safe as a public company. It's just something we advise our founders just to take very seriously. It's not don't go public, it's just take it super seriously. Very different than when I came up in the 90s. A lot of people here kind of experienced this, when you would just routinely take these companies public early. Now it's just too dangerous to do that. I am going to ask you a bubble question. You should know, I asked Mark one bubble question yesterday. I have 4 pages here. Most of that is his response. Yeah, that's right. So let me which caused him to pull the question. Mostly. So let me ask it this way, which is a couple years ago, when you guys were really starting to grow, when Andreessen Horowitz was really starting to grow, there was a lot of blame thrown on you guys. There was a lot of Andreessen Horowitz is driving up prices, kind of across the board, both on the companies you were bidding on and then on peers, with comps. Yeah. So I guess let me ask this 2 ways. The first is, are you to blame? Are current valuations your fault? Right. I can only quote the great thinkers James Franco and Seth Rogen in the interview. I believe they were simply peanut butter and jealous. So in all seriousness, I actually think we weren't overpaying. So deals that we did at the time that were considered extreme, we invested in Facebook at $35 billion. Facebook's today worth $250 billion. We invested in Twitter, which was considered crazy at the time, for $4 billion. Today it's 30. I actually think it was, number one, untrue at the time that we were overpaying, and I think some of the investments actually bear that out. And then the other thing that happens is and this is just fact, like we routinely walk from deals over valuation. From price, and we do that all the time.
Do you do that more now than you used to?
No, I think, well, it really started picking up. People forget, 2008, 2009, we started in March of 2009. So we started our firm completely coincidentally in March of 2009, which was at the low point of the NASDAQ after the financial crisis. And so people were like miserable. And actually that was sort of this real flash to risk aversion. And it was a dark time. The darkness didn't last that long, but it was dark while it was there. And so we certainly walk on valuation more now than we did then. It was just, valuations are just less hot then as well.
There's an argument with valuations today, and you're starting to see for the first time ever companies announce valuations when they announce their funding rounds. Domo did that today, which used to, as a reporter, used to have to beg for a valuation. One of the arguments is, particularly the enterprise sector, that if you announce that you're a $1 billion plus company, that potential clients suddenly think you are stable. It's the old argument why you go public, right? Do you think that's a valid argument for raising at high prices because the market is now going to take you more seriously?
I don't know. For sure, this was always a reason to go public. And by the way, it still is a reason to go public, which is big companies would prefer to buy strategic technology from other public companies. That gives them a lot of assurance. I'd say I don't know that it actually helps that much on the customer side. I think where it helps a lot is on recruiting. And I think there's this kind of ego, it's sort of this ego-driven kind of thing it looks like it's ego-driven, and it actually goes to recruiting, which is, engineers, sort of the cream of the crop engineers in this environment have a lot of choices. And so I think it's sort of this arms race thing. I think the feeling is if somebody else has a valuation at a certain level and you don't, you're going to be at a recruiting disadvantage. That's part of the current environment I'm not such a big fan of. I mean, I don't think valuation should be like the main topic of discussion. I think the substance of these businesses should be the main topic of discussion. And it's actually the interesting thing that's happening. And I think when employees are looking for companies to go work at, I think that they should think about the substance of the companies they're going to. So that's what we always tell people, but there is no question having this sort of bright, shining, spotlight at the top of your, top of your website with a big number on it. At least people right now think it helps.
I'm going to ask one last bubble question, which is you've said repeatedly that while you think certain things might be overpriced, you're not concerned about this massive kind of 2000. And correct me if I'm wrong about this. You're not worried about this 99, 2000 sort of bubble. I guess what I'm trying to get a sense of, though, there's a lot of things which seem to be playing into valuations rising, not even just in tech, but in public markets too. Things like interest rates, energy prices, et cetera. When you try to analyze this and say we're not in a bubble, or at least not in anything extreme, how do you strip out those macro factors into your analysis?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One is tech is really small from a macro standpoint. Tech is really tiny. So all of venture capital is $20 to $30 billion a year. All private tech investing right now is $50 billion a year, and there's a lot of these bubble articles talk about, oh my God, $50 billion a year. How can you possibly put that much money into new companies, right? Including all these late stage rounds. So against that, the S&P 500, just the top 500 companies in the country will give back $1 trillion in the next 12 months in the form of dividends and buybacks. And so total private tech investing is 1/20th of just dividends and buybacks out of the S&P 500. And so, and I would say like 1/20th, like is that too much? Is that too little? It doesn't feel like it's too much. Like it feels like there should be some level of growth and innovation in the world. It seems like maybe 1/20th of the amount of money being returned from the big companies might be appropriate. The other really striking thing about the macro environment, interest rates, there's now over $5 trillion of government debt on the bond market trading at negative yields. And in fact, the Swiss central bank today, for the first time, I think in history, issued new 10-year debt that carries with it a negative yield on day one, where you literally have to pay, you don't get a coupon, you literally have to pay the Swiss central bank every 6 months for the honor of holding their debt. And so tech is just such
Did you buy?
What's that?
Did you buy?
No, I did not buy.
Okay,
I mean, compared to that, holding cash, if you've got, a strong enough lock on your door and a big enough mattress is actually a good idea. Point being, tech is just this tiny little thing on the side as compared to these kind of big macro forces. And so I don't, at least I've never met anybody who can kind of try to figure out how to navigate the micro of tech while trying to figure out the macro of this. I mean, to start with, I've never met anybody who can predict anything macro. The Federal Reserve, all the big officials in Washington all thought the housing market was just fine in 2007. So I've never met anybody.
You don't have any concern, just as an investor, and this will be my last investor question, that if, say, rates start to rise, that these large mutual funds, et cetera, will bail on basically doing the later stage rounds for your companies?
It's like I said, within the the big mutual funds, the big mutual funds. But just again put it in context. The big mutual funds, like my friend Will Danoff runs a fund at Fidelity that does a lot of this later stage stuff. His fund's like a $120 billion fund, right? It's like the total amount of across all tech investment is less, is less than that this year, and so it's just a very, very, very small amount of money. And so I think it's hard. I haven't seen anybody who can construct a theory under which you might somehow calibrate against what's happening in the macro environment. Again, I think it goes back to substance. If we're building high quality companies, if the customers like the products, if the technology innovation is real, then the substance is going to win out in the end.
Let me go back, and I mean way back. You grew up in Wisconsin, correct? So actually, I should ask, was Monday night hard for you? Was that bad? Did you care?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah, I got over it.
There are people who, I didn't know if you weren't going to come.
I got over it at a young age.
So something you said, you did sit down with the FT earlier this year in a lunch, and one of the things you talked about was kind of that a lot of your family was involved in farming or involved in agriculture, and it kind of taught you delayed gratification. And you said that served you very well as an engineer early on. Yeah. I'm curious, given what we see in the market, how you've got people who can start a company one day and it seems to be, massive 3 days later. Yeah. Do you think, is that ethos, that willingness to have delayed gratification, is that in Silicon Valley today among the younger entrepreneurs?
So I think there's a schizophrenia, and I think there's always been a schizophrenia to high-tech startups. And so the core, the way I view it is the core of what we all do, the core of it is hardcore innovation. And the kind of innovation that takes a very long time to play out. A lot of the things that are working today are things that have been developed literally over decades. I mean, the Apple Watch, right? The Apple Watch is, one way to think about it is a Unix computer. Unix was invented in the mid-'60s, and here we are 50 years later, and they're finally going to get it to the point where they can put it in a device as small as a watch. So these are very kind of long-term things, and the engineers who work on these things, work on them for a very long time, and that's where deferral of gratification is a very big deal, because if you don't set these big goals, you'll never be willing to put the time in it, you'll never do the big things. However, it's also true that the engineer in the lab, right, is not going to build a company by himself or herself that is then going to have the impact on the world, that a company like Apple can, or that many of these new companies can. And the way I always describe this to engineers is it's just, you'd like to believe the world will beat a better, build a better mousetrap, the world beats a path to your door. The reality is the world is a really, really big place, and there's a lot of people running around with a lot on their mind, and you really have to figure out how to build a company that can put out a message and can actually reach people and have an impact globally, and that requires the other side of things, which is, being able to go out. The extroverts and the promoters and the hustlers and the salespeople and the marketing people and that whole side of things. And so I think when the Valley works well, there's a calibration between the two mindsets.
And do you think it's that calibration's
I think we're in the zone. Look, in 2004, it got completely reset back to just engineers. Like it got very badly torqued. Well, in '99 it got reset almost entirely all the way over to just like salespeople, and then in 2004 it got reset all the way over to just engineers. And I think the entrepreneurial community has been battling to try to, within itself, to try to figure out what is the optimal blend. I think it's pretty good.
One of the things you've talked about a lot, or a lot of people talk to you about, say, with technological advancements, it's going to destroy labor. Or it's going to replace lots of jobs. We're going to have a bunch of people sitting around being served by robots, which kind of sounds delightful. Yeah. But you hear that, and you fight back against that. You say, no, technology destruction creates new opportunities. One of the places, though, you say that you've seen too little innovation, two sectors are healthcare and education. You've said that a few times. But you guys don't seem to, your firm doesn't invest much in education or healthcare. A few education deals, I think one healthcare, no hard science. If those are the areas so ripe for innovation, why aren't you putting money there? Yeah,
so let me restate kind of the thesis of why I said what you said I said, which is healthcare and education. So everybody complains, and oh my God, robots are going to kill all the jobs, and this is going to be terrible, and we need less innovation because of that. But then simultaneously, everybody complains, oh my God, look at the rising cost of healthcare and the rising cost of education. And in fact, healthcare and education costs are rising much faster than inflation, and in fact, if anything, faster now than ever before. The economic explanation for that actually is insufficient productivity growth in education and healthcare, which is to say insufficient technological innovation in education and healthcare. And so that's why we have these incredibly labor-intensive, healthcare systems, incredibly labor-intensive schools. If you want to bring down the prices of healthcare and education, the answer will be more innovation, more technology, which will then have the effect of freaking everybody out and saying, oh my God, you're going to kill all the jobs. And it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want cheap healthcare or lots of healthcare workers? Like, take your pick, but like there is a trade-off. Now, what ends up after that, which doesn't result in all those jobs actually getting destroyed, is other things happen, which is to say, if you bring down the price of education or bring down the price of healthcare, it turns out there are a lot of people in the world who need what we would consider modern healthcare and modern education who today can't afford it. And so if you bring down the price, you'll have elasticity and you'll have a huge explosion of demand globally.
But to do that, we've got to create new companies that do that.
To do that, we need innovation. To do that, we need technology. To do that, I think we need new companies. We need tech startups in education, healthcare. We are actually active in both. We've been active in education kind of the whole time. Healthcare, we're getting deeper into now, and we have a couple of new people in the firm who are focused on that. Those markets are very attractive because they're so big and the opportunity is so clear. Does
the regulatory piece scare you off?
Yes, they're very daunting because they are so regulated and so heavily dominated by governments that they are very daunting. And so it takes, it always takes a special founder to make one of these companies work, but it takes a particularly special founder to navigate their way through and figure out how to have a company in one of those sectors work.
Let me ask, one of the big issues here over the last month or so, and granted I'm on the other coast, but it seems like the big issue here was obviously the lawsuit, the Ellen Powell and the Kleiner suit, and kind of the issues that raised. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is a venture capitalist responsibility? What can VCs explicitly do to kind of address these issues, both of their portfolio companies and within their own firms? And I guess as a corollary of that, when are you guys going to hire a female partner?
Yeah, exactly. So, a couple of numbers. I'm so glad you asked. So our firm, this is the part I didn't send him. So our firm is 107 employees, 107 total staff partners today at all levels, 52% women. And by the way, the majority, not just that, the high performers in the firm in the performance reviews, substantially higher percentage of women.
Does that mean you have 8 GPs, so you guys are the low performers?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are certain opinions on that. Seven actually, but yes. And then 20% Black and Latino. And so we've had a big internal push on this. I'll come back to the GP thing, which I'm sure you'll bring back up. There is a lot that venture capital firms can do and tech can do, and then there's a lot that we probably can't do. And let me just start by saying I don't think I'm an expert on this, and so I don't propose to have all the answers. What we've been focusing on is 2 areas in particular. Pipeline, which is just to say increase the numbers, just more training, more experience, get more people coming up. And then the other is access. And what we think basically is so much of this for people who get qualified, so much of the next step is then do you know the right people? Are you able to get connected to the right opportunities at the right time? So there's a bunch of things that we do. We've had a whole program for 3 years on this. In the last 2 years, we've done 32 events touching thousands of people. And we focus on 3 segments for what we call inclusion, women, underrepresented minorities, and veterans. So we've had literally thousands of people across 32 events networking into the Silicon Valley network. We also work particularly closely with 3 outside organizations that we work to support and we donate to, Code 2040 for minority entrepreneurs, Girls Who Code, it's obvious, and then Hack the Hood, which is a great organization up here in Oakland, also for entrepreneurship. We're going to do more on all these fronts. We're going to crank up all of our efforts. We're going to support, and we're actively looking for more outside organizations to work with. If you happen to be a woman or a minority or a veteran and you're not connected to our network and you'd like to be, please tell me. If you know, incredibly high potential people who are in those groups, please let me know and we would love to plug them in. So there's a lot more that I think we can do. But again, I would go back and I would say, I certainly would not propose to have all the answers, and I think that, we're probably scratching the surface of what ultimately has to happen.
So I'll go back to that GP question you said I'd come back to.
So the female GP thing has been very frustrating. Our very first offer of a GP at our firm after Benamy was a female partner, and she has turned us down, I think, now 5 times, and it's been driving me crazy.
She's CEO somewhere, or is something?
No comment.
No comment.
No comment. She's fantastic. I won't name her. We're still trying to get her. We have offered to several other women, and we have so far had them all turn us down. There's a very interesting phenomenon taking place there for the kind of thing that we do, for the sort of thing that we're looking for, the background we're looking for, the way we set our firm up. And this is true, I think this is true at other firms, I think this is true at the CEO level as well, is there just, you see this when you talk to female CEOs, they get so many offers, that because there are so few and the need is so intense, they get so many offers that you actually have this kind of, they're just drowning in opportunity. Which is why we think so much of the work has to be at the pipeline and access level, which is we have to get more people developed, we have to get more people rising up the ranks, we have to get more executives. Another program we just did that I think is going to help a lot on this is we just did something with Stanford called the Directors College, Female Directors College, Women Directors College. And we did a whole training program. And very interesting. So Stanford runs a directors college, so they do this anyway. They kind of teach people how to be directors of companies, and it's sort of considered a credential for corporate directors. We did it specifically for women in tech who have reached a certain level in their career who now would have the opportunity to go on their first board. It's actually something we came up with that I think is fairly clever, which is we basically did two things. One is we created a credential. And so now there's something that says I am qualified to be a director on a board that is just like an unambiguous thing connected to a credible institution like Stanford. And then the other thing we did was we created a network of, and we announced it, and we made it very public. And Diane Green and I did a whole thing there that we put as a podcast. It's traveled pretty far. Diane says incredible. Diane's on the board of Google and Intuit and has amazing advice. And we spread that, and so now we're getting a lot of companies, both small companies and big companies, saying, aha, I need more women directors on my board. I didn't think I knew enough people. Can I get connected into this network? And so I think the answer is going to lie a lot in that kind of thing.
Let me ask you two final quick questions. One, political question. You supported Mitt Romney last presidential campaign. We've got a couple announced candidates. A lot of everybody expects to be candidates. Do you have a horse already?
I am really struggling between the anti-economics party and the anti-science party. And I think I'm highly tempted. I think I might sit this one out. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Fair enough. Final question for you. You just had a baby, your first, recently, about a month ago.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. There's always you're a very busy person. You're on a lot of boards. You run a venture capital firm. You do all sorts of things. There's always this question when people have a kid. It's usually asked to women of, can you have it all? So I'm curious. Do you feel you're about to give something up or cut back somewhere now that you've got a kid?
This is the surprise question. That he didn't warn me about.
I didn't know you had your little sheet with all the women and the stats.
My binder's full of women.
Your candidate, not mine.
Was that okay? All right. Okay. I don't know. I mean, look, the truth of it is, I think we're in a fortunate enough situation economically where there's trade-offs that we don't have to make that a lot of people have to make. I think on top of that, I think if I were doing what I was doing 10 years ago, I was traveling so much that I think that would have been a real problem. I think now I'm home all the time. We're very Silicon Valley concentrated in our firm, so at least I'm hopeful that I'll be able to balance it.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dan. We have something coming.